Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Brett Grist, who's the exploration manager of Cornwall Resources, focusing on the Redmoor Tin, Tungsten and Copper mining project located in eastern Cornwall, which is in the southwest of England, for those that are listening all around the world. The project, or Cornwall Resources, is owned by AIM-listed Strategic Minerals PLC. Brett has a background in geology with more than 20 years experience in exploration, mining project development, and playing a leading role in projects across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, including taking projects from early stage exploration through feasibility and into development. He also co-chairs the UK mining group of the Critical Minerals Association. So I'm sure Brett will explain a little bit more about that later in the podcast. So that's welcome, Brett, to the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. So how you doing, Brett?
Very well, Rob. It's Friday afternoon, a great time to be on. And yeah, thanks very much for the invite. There's a lot going on here and look forward to talking about it.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time as well. And I know you're busy at the moment, as we were just speaking off air before we started the recording. So yeah, I really appreciate your time. So if you can start us off, tell us a little bit about your background. So back when you graduated, and just give us an overview of obviously your career, your journey to where you are today.
Well, I was really lucky, Rob. I grew up here in southwest England. On Dartmoor, which is a national park. It's a national park on top of really large granite. I was always interested, what's this granite and what are these old mines that I see around the edge of it? So I was always kicking around those. And then I found out I could do that as a career. So I went off, studied that at the Cornwall School of Mines, Imperial College. I studied mining geology there. That was a fantastic course because it didn't just do basic geology. It also took you through things like mineral processing, mining, and even mineral economics, so things that I've used all the way through my career. But I finished there, and at that time, unlike now, there was no work in the UK. So I jumped on a plane, went off to Western Australia, got 2 job offers within a week, and actually went for a job on a mine in Coolgardie. That was owned by the then Cornwall Resources, and I had a fantastic year out there. As well as getting excellent experience in near mine exploration, I managed to pick up an Australian private pilot's license, something I'd always wanted to do. Then that finished, I had to leave Australia, my visa ran out, came back to the UK, did some consulting work with a company called ACA Howe in Portugal, that was on gold, and then got an invite to go over to West Africa with a company called Reunion Mining. Reunion were doing some really fantastic work all over Africa, they had an excellent team, some of whom I maintain contact with until today. And my first job with them was in Mali. So I was about 22 years old and I was parachuted into this remote bit of Western Mali. I had something like 120 local employees under me. We had a big trenching program going, manual trenching, soil sampling, cutting lines through the bush, and then following that up with some RC drilling. After a year there, I went off to Ghana, where Reunion had the Girano gold project. That subsequently became a really large find and was sold to Redback and then Kinross as part of another deal, I think for several $1 billion, a very substantial project in combination with the other assets that company had. After that, I went off to business school, and then I got an invite to go and work in Yemen, of all places. I think at the time I had to look up where Yemen was, so I pretty quickly learned where it was. That was initially in a project geologist role, but I spent a lot of my time interacting with the local community. And because of that, I then ended up as country manager and basically running the show. And we took that project from relatively early exploration, it was a lead, zinc, silver project, through to, basically through licensing. So they had a mining law, but that didn't actually say how you built a mine. So we had to create some more laws around that, get those passed through Parliament. Yeah, these are things you don't get taught at uni, but as many of us in our industry are able to do. You adapt, you work out how to do it, you find good people to work with, and then you come to a worked solution. So we managed to get a law passed through Parliament that actually enabled you to build a mine. We got that financed, started building it. I bought the mining fleet. We took on a pretty large workforce, maximised local employment. There was a tradition at the time of basically paying people to stay at home that the oil companies had come up with. We weren't going to do that. We decided to actually pay local people to do an honest day's work, and they really appreciated that. It did actually get reported on WikiLeaks at one point that, yeah, what's this mining company doing something different where they're not paying people to stay at home, they're expecting them to do work. That was the sort of the strength of the feeling in some of the local security companies. I think it was a Belgian company that misbriefed the US embassy at the time. But I'm convinced we did things the right way there. Unfortunately, following the Arab Spring, things started getting a little bit sticky security-wise, so I decided it was time to leave Yemen. It's a real shame. I love the people there. Any of us who spend time in these countries build up some really good relationships with the people, a good understanding of the culture. Culture goes further than language. And yeah, it was quite sad to leave. But I moved on to Eastern DRC for a bit of peace and quiet, working with a company called Kaza Mining. And there I was CEO of the company. And we took a project, the CC project, from a state where it only had a couple of holes in the ground through to being a 1.2 million ounce resource with some very clear signs of there being a great deal more there. So yeah, that was an exciting project. Again, similar challenges. That was a pretty hot area security-wise. I was quite well equipped for that, having worked in Yemen. But it's not about having lots of guns and barbed wire fences. In fact, in my view, the moment you start putting up big fences and things, you're physically putting barriers up against the community. You lose a lot of that information flow that can actually avoid you having problems. So one might hear of some basically rebels in the region through the community, and through having that messaging, you would be able to understand how to react. You would keep all your people safe, and there wouldn't be any issues. Whereas if you'd gone for the heavy approach, that's when things can get very wrong. It's not the right way to do things, in my view. If you've got to get that heavy, you probably shouldn't be there. So I had that really interesting time, about 4 years, heading up that project in DRC. And then I had to leave DRC for health reasons. Basically, I had a series of infections coming on. I knew something wasn't right. I went to see the School of Tropical Medicine, and they couldn't quite work out what was going on. But eventually, I got diagnosed with leukemia.
Yeah, and I was gonna go into that after you finished giving us a summary of your career, because obviously that is something that's obviously affected your life at that particular time. But obviously it didn't stop you, or it hasn't seemed to have stopped you. And obviously a lot of positives have come from that. So I wondered if you could cover that. Obviously, once you found out that unfortunately you had leukemia, and that process, and then suddenly coming out of that to where you are today.
Yeah, well, the diagnosis was a complete shock. I was expecting to have a tropical disease or something. As people working in these exciting countries, I'd been shot at, and I'd had malaria and things over the years. You don't expect something like that. You think you're immortal. But yeah, you deal with it. It was a tough time for me and for the family. I recovered from that. I did then, unfortunately, get ill again with the same thing. I had a relapse. Fortunately, I was able to get a match of a stem cell donor. That was someone called David, who's a firefighter from Scotland. And so at this point, I have to give a pitch for joining your local stem cell registry, especially to any of our younger listeners. They love people in their 20s and 30s for this. In the UK, the best one to join for younger people is anthonynolan.org. If you sign up for one of those stem cell registries, you may save someone's life. And all that's involved is basically giving a cheek swab. They get a little bit of DNA from that. And then if you're found to be a match for someone, the actual process of donating cells later on is often quite straightforward. Typically, they just hook you up to something like a blood pump. It's a bit like giving just a blood donation. They filter out the cells they need from that and give those to the person whose life needs saving. So I was really fortunate. I went through a tough time through that, managed to get through the other side. I did see a lot of people who didn't, and that puts a real perspective on life. Yeah, we are all fortunate. We should make the most of the opportunities that are in front of us. And looking back, do I regret going off and working in places like Congo? Not at all. You never know what's around the corner. Make the most of whatever is in front of you. Having picked myself up from that, I did some charity work, some fundraising. I'm a patient ambassador for blood cancer charity, Blood Cancer UK. I was supposed to be going up Kilimanjaro for them with my donor. To see what other work is out there. And I was thinking maybe I'd have to have a career change or something. I didn't fancy immediately going off to Congo or somewhere again. And I was fortunate. I saw a job advertised exploring in East Cornwall. That was advertised by Cornwall Resources, the company I presently work for. I saw that just over 4.5 years ago. And I was really fortunate. The guys there, they could have said, hey, is this guy up to it? He's been ill. Can he do it? But they took a punt on me, and I like to think that really paid off. Hopefully this is a message for other employers. If you've got someone who's had a bit of a kicking, take a chance on them, because they are going to be so motivated and they will really give their all. And that's certainly everything I've always intended to do in my work. Coming back onto sort of thread in terms of career path, I joined Cornwall Resources 4.5 years ago. We've managed to put into place a really excellent exploration program. At the time, people were wondering, are you guys really going to find anything in Cornwall? It's all been mined out, hasn't it? Well, that's not the case. And we've put together a real world-class resource with a lot of exploration upside around it. So we found 11.7 million tons of, or 11.7 million tons at a grade of 1.17% tin equivalent, consisting of a combination of tin, tungsten, and copper, and with significant exploration upside around it. Next steps on that are going to be to take it through to a pre-feasibility study. Maybe it'll grow further. We've got substantial further exploration rights around it that we haven't explored actively until now. And on that, as we may come on to in a moment, we've recently started some work under an initiative known as Deep Digital Cornwall. So it's a really exciting area to be working. We've had a lot of success, and I think there's a lot more to be found out there.
Yes, certainly. Appreciate you obviously give us an overview of your career, and obviously the unfortunate circumstances that you found yourself in. But as you said, it has turned out well. So if anyone that's listening that is going through a particular difficult patch, I suppose just look positive moving forward, because you just, like you said, you never know what's around the corner. And it's a great story, and appreciate you obviously sharing it with our audience. So moving on, I wondered if you can give us an overview of Cornwall Resources. Like you said, you've been there for 4 years. I wondered if you can just give us a little bit of a history since you started, so our audience around the world is aware of what's happening in Cornwall.
Yeah, fantastic. So the Redmoor project is the main asset that Cornwall Resources have. It's an exploration project looking for an underground tin, tungsten, copper deposit. Like most areas of Cornwall, there's a long history of mining in the area. You can go back to, for example, the 12th century, and there's evidence of stream tinning on surface. Incidentally, that stream tinning, when you look at it from the air, is very similar to, for example, some of the alluvial mining that you might see going on in DRC. I've flown over some of those areas and thought, goodness me, those are so similar. What's going on? Some techniques don't change. And then we saw a more recent pre-industrial series of mining. So this is when they started inventing steam engines that enabled you to do underground mining by dewatering. So there's fairly significant mining in the area of the project. The local village is known as Kelly Bray, near to the town of Callington. That mining was substantial enough to justify the opening of a railway line. It really gives a measure of how much was going on. And it's interesting going through some of the historical records from back then, because it was real Wild West. You had cholera epidemics and things coming through and wiping out populations of people. It must have been really tough conditions. But it was work, people needed work, and they bravely got on with this in the sort of noble tradition. But then everything stopped in about 1946, and everyone thought, well, mining's finished there. Then in the 1980s, there was something called the Minerals Assistance Programme. I think that was funded by the then Department of Trade and Industry, and that encouraged a lot of exploration across southwest England. Unfortunately, that then stopped in 1985 due to the collapse in the international tin price. But the work that had been done, which included at Redmoor the discovery of a new type of deposit known as a sheeted vein system, and that was adjacent to some of the more traditional lodes or veins that the old timers had mined, that work still remained. And so once metal prices started recovering a little bit, an Australian company, New Age Exploration, started looking at what opportunities there were in southwest England. They identified the Redmoor opportunity. They worked out who had the mineral rights, which in England is not as simple as it should be. And those turned out to be held by a local scrapyard owner. Who would have thought it? But anyway, they managed to come up with an agreement on that. And then they brought in joint venture partner Strategic Minerals. We ran one phase of drilling funded by Strategic. That had excellent results. We then came along with a second phase of drilling. The grades then were even stronger. We're talking a very high grade deposit. And then on the strength of that, Strategic decided to buy out New Age Exploration. So that work has taken the 1980s work. It's added a further very roughly 14,000 meters of diamond drilling to that. And that's enabled us to come up with a current resource. And then on top of that, we've got the surrounding exploration license. That is highly prospective. We've got, for example, a topographic feature which lines up very nicely with the surface projection of what we now identify as the sheeted vein system. The sheeted vein system consists of about an 80-meter wide package of subparallel quartz veins, heavily mineralized with tungsten in the form of wolframite, tin as cassiterite, and there's some chalcopyrite around. But looking along that strike, there's an obvious feature. We've run some student projects in conjunction with Camborne School of Mines. Those identified some possible extensions of mineralization. And that's made us think, okay, well, what else is out there? So I don't think this is the end of the story. What it has led through to is we've been fortunate to be part of the Deep Digital Cornwall initiative. That's a project being run by the University of Exeter, Camborne School of Mines. We are part of that. Another industry partner is Cornish Lithium. We receive funding from the European Regional Development Funds. It's administered through the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And this is an example of getting some funding from the UK into mining. The work we're doing is using Redmoor as a digital laboratory. And basically, we're getting a load of data that will enable us to see where the granite extends and where mineralization continues. We're doing this through a gravity survey. So essentially, one can see where the granites are on either side. The granites are the sources of the mineralization. So you've got, for example, Dartmoor. Further west, you've got Bodmin Moor. There are a few smaller granites that pop up along that chain. But what happens in between? The old timers came along. They mined in valleys. They identified mineralization in those, and those became mines. In between, though, no exploration was carried out. So this is where you get the paradox of southwest England being one of the most heavily mined but least explored parts of the world. I just think it's totally mad. You know, I've worked all over Africa. People have spent lots of money exploring, in some cases, moose pasture, as North American friends might say. But here in the UK, very little proper, in inverted commas, exploration has been done. So this deep digital Cornwall work has enabled us to go back to grassroots, carry out some soil geochemistry, carry out some gravity work, and see what else is out there. The data we produce will be made open source once it's ready. It's the right thing to do with it being publicly funded. But it will, of course, also be of interest to our company and hopefully to others. And our vision in terms of what this might then lead into, if we could show the business case around this, that by just operating in this way over, say, a 20 square kilometre new, in inverted commas, exploration area, if that works, then we can turn around to the UK government and say, why don't you consider a region-wide exploration programme? With the mineral rights system as it is in the UK, where typically people have got smaller packages, it's unlikely that an individual company will be able to carry out a big systematic exploration programme across the whole region. But wouldn't it be great if the UK government, perhaps post-Brexit, decide, hey, let's get in here, let's create a mining industry, let's produce metals on our home soil to supply this new green industrial revolution that everyone's talking about?
Well, fingers crossed. We can only hope. Well, I suppose we don't necessarily need to hope. I suppose we need to just to keep moving forward and putting news feed out there, and obviously keep lobbying the government to sort of invest in the area, which they obviously have started. But obviously that needs to continue, and for them to understand that there is a short supply of these metals and commodities globally, and we have a sufficient amount down there. So yeah, I suppose it's just keep lobbying the government and producing results that you've been producing so far.
Yeah, and that's where we've got together with other companies as part of the Critical Minerals Association. Your voice as an individual company is easily lost, but together we can be much stronger. We can have a really significant impact in saying, look, government, there is a solution out there. You want to obtain these metals. You don't necessarily want to be reliant on some of the more traditional countries for supply of the metals. We've got them on our doorstep. This is the solution. This is how we can do it.
Yeah. Obviously, you mentioned the Camborne School of Mines. How has your relationship been with them, and what else have they been providing yourselves and other companies in the area?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I was previously working in DRC. Contrasting DRC versus Cornwall, obviously they're very different locations. But one of the advantages of being in Cornwall is we have, beyond the excellent mineral potential, we have excellent skills on our doorstep. We've got a stream of students being produced by the university, excellent people. I mentioned Camborne School of Mines. There's also the University of Plymouth close by. We've had enormous success recruiting from both universities. It's always a pleasure to be able to give people that vital first job in the industry. We've had people join us and then go on and join Glencore, for example. It's just getting people that start, adding some value for them. In terms of other cooperations with the university, we probably run 4 or 5 different projects a year with the university. It's a pleasure to work with them. And as I mentioned, compared with being overseas where you're in a remote location, you don't have any of these facilities. This is a real advantage that we have in the domestic market. We've got that ability for valuable cooperation, and it's a two-way thing. The university really benefit from it. Just recently, I was able to supply about 200 kilograms of material to a university for one of the projects they're doing. It works and should help generate really useful research and innovation that may feed back to the industry in time.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. How is exploration across the UK at the moment? And how do you see the future playing out? Obviously, we've just mentioned about obviously Cornwall and obviously encouraging the government to continue investing in the area. But how would you sum up overall the UK overall in terms of exploration and opportunities that are out there?
I would say, Rob, it's the best it's been in 35 years. It's really a fantastic time to be in it. If there are people perhaps working overseas thinking they'd like to come back to the UK or to move to the UK, now could be a good time to do it. There's something like 10 companies working in the metal space in the UK. There are still some headwinds in terms of the government is not necessarily as joined up as it could be on developing metals projects, and that's something within the Critical Minerals Association we're trying to work on. But it's a fantastic place to work. There's a lot going on. There are some significant sums of money being raised. There have been a number of, there has been a recent IPO that was successful. You've got people such as Tungsten West, very close to us. I know you recently had Max Denning on, a very interesting interview. What we need is a success story. Deliver one of those, and we're going to see one positive one very soon. That will then be the evidence that the government need to really get behind the industry and make things happen.
Yeah.
So good time to be here.
What challenges do you see ahead within the mining industry here in the UK? Obviously, if government gets on our side, like you said, the Camborne School of Mines are producing some good students and good graduates. What would you say are the major challenges over the next 3 to 5 years and possibly beyond?
The biggest challenges are in terms of getting started, really. In a typical country, you'll go in, you'll perhaps meet the mines department, you'll get access to historical data, you'll come in, you'll pick up your mineral rights, you'll have a clear license with them, perhaps going prospecting license, exploration license, then converting that through to a mining license, maybe with some relinquishments along the way. It doesn't work like that in the UK. You have to spend a lot of time, first of all, working out legally who has the mineral rights. This can be quite fragmented, so it's quite a specialized task. It's possible, and the companies who are operating here have been very effective in achieving that, but it is effectively a barrier to entry that maybe shouldn't be there. So that could be streamlined. Beyond that, the government is not particularly effective at enabling the mining industry. You have to deal with many different departments. There's no individual mines minister. We're fortunate in Cornwall in that the council, who are the planning authority responsible for giving planning permission for development of the project, are generally supportive of metals projects. But it's not as easy as it could or should be. And so, again, that's one of the things the Critical Minerals Association are trying to address. But equally, looking at the long term, 10, 20 years perhaps, we've got the push for net zero. Well, this is the opportunity. Let's produce some metals closer to home. You reduce the shipping involved in getting those to the end market, which could potentially be one of these gigafactories that the UK government are talking about at the moment. So that's the opportunity. We've got high-grade material close to home. Does it make more sense to be mining all our copper from a low-grade porphyry somewhere and perhaps just offshoring the CO2 emissions and not worrying too much about them? Or should we actually do something in our backyard where we've got some high-grade tin, copper, tungsten? Let's try extracting that. If you're mining at maybe 10 times the grade of a lower grade deposit, then it's likely that because you're grinding up a much smaller amount of material, you're going to be generating an awful lot less in the way of emissions. May not be net zero straight away, although there are opportunities, for example, if you introduce geothermal or wind power energy, which the UK is making excellent progress in. But this is something that could help address our future needs. It could improve security of supply for the UK. We don't know what trade wars we may have in the future. And it would help address that issue from society of can we produce the metals we all need for our cars, for our phones, in a more sustainable way. But part of that is having an honest conversation with society. And that's not perhaps something that the minerals industry has been very good at in the past. We've talked in the past of a social license to operate. One of the first things I do in exploration going into an area is to take the time to understand who are the key actors in a local area, who do we need to know, establishing communication pathways, hearing what people's concerns are. The concerns might be valid, they might be some misapprehension that can easily be addressed, but you've got to have that communication going, whether it's Yemen, Congo, Cornwall, or anywhere else. If you've got that happening and you haven't got big fences up, then you can solve a lot of the problems. So that can solve the local social license to operate. but then you've got the national and international social license to operate. Do people view mining as something they want to study at university? This is a bit of a problem for the industry at the moment. We need to show mining as a necessity for modern society. And people like the Critical Minerals Association pay a lot of attention to that. They've got particular work happening on communication of the importance of mining, relevance to society, but it's something we can all be doing and all need to be doing. We need to get out there, talk to schools, talk to other people, and just get the general narrative away from mining is bad to, well, mining is needed. If we get the right people into it, people who care, then we can do it in the right way, and we will do it the right way.
Yeah. Talking about ESG and focusing back on Cornwall, how is the local communities, I suppose, reacting to some of the things that are happening in the mining industry in that area? Obviously, you're going to have little pockets of different communities. How are they responding to some of the news that is coming out?
Generally, it's very, very positive. Cornwall, in a number of areas, is quite economically deprived, and people want employment. But it can't be employment at any cost. It's got to be employment from an industry created in the right way. But as with any country, it's not homogenous. You need to understand the nature of the local area you're in. If it's an area with a lot of retired people, that's highly scenic, an area of outstanding natural beauty, it's going to be more challenging than perhaps a brownfield site. The area we're in is semi-brownfield. We are helped by the fact that our potential mine is going to be underground. So that's what we're planning on. That means, for example, that access from the mine to the processing plant will be by a decline, leading through to the processing plant being able to be located at quite some distance from the mineral deposit. So we minimise a lot of those local impacts. At the same time, through our exploration, I think you can see in the image behind me, that's what one of our drill sites looked like. So using appropriate materials, it's working in the right way with that local community. We could have tried to get, I don't know, some sort of fiberglass casing around the drill rig. I'm not sure how that effective would have been. The best solution for us actually turned out to be putting a big straw bale wall around the drill rig. It's appropriate for the local environment we were in, and it worked really well. We had no complaints at all through any of our 2 programs of drilling. So anywhere in the world that you are, it's a question of adapting, using the appropriate measures, and in doing so, right from the start, you can make sure you have no impacts or very limited impacts on your host community.
Yeah, and obviously with mining picking up in the area of Cornwall, have you seen a surge of people that know nothing about mining that suddenly gained an interest in what is happening and taken that further? I suppose a lot of people, I suppose it's all people around the world, whether they're in the UK or any other country, if mining isn't a main industry like it is, say, in Australia, people don't know what mining actually stands for and what it actually means to us building a future and I suppose moving forward as a community. Have you seen people come out of the woodwork that know nothing about mining that have suddenly taken an interest? And have you done anything to persuade them, to encourage them to learn more?
There are a number of gaps in terms of people's understanding of mining's relevance. I think a lot of it even comes back to the 1980s in the UK, where mining was seen as bad. We had coal mining, the strikes, sort of wars with Thatcher and so on. So then we need to move forwards to modern mining, which is a different thing. Far fewer impacts than people might imagine, and is a necessity to society. So we've got to get that message out there. I think there is interest. What's particularly encouraging is that a growing number of ladies at school in particular, through things like Women in Mining, are getting involved. At my daughter's school, they've got a geology group, and then they do try and send quite a lot of people off to study geology at university. So there's a small number of people getting interested as a result of what they hear, but it's not as many as we need. I think the other aspect as well is people tend to head straight for geology. Geology is important. I'm a geologist, but we need more than geology. Yeah, we need mining engineers. We need mineral processing. We did hear of Camborne actually shutting down some of its courses. That was a retrograde step that many of us were very concerned at. Again, if the UK government is keen on establishing a metals sector here, we need to see that we've got full flow-through of graduates in mineral processing, mining engineering, as well as the traditional geology route. Let's get those people in, let's create the opportunities here, and let's build a really healthy domestic mining sector.
Yeah, and I think, again, by talking a lot about some of these issues, and obviously where you are in Cornwall, informing more of the public what you're doing and just keeping them up to date, and again just reinforcing what mining actually is. And I suppose if many of us do that, the message will get out there as far as it can. So obviously you guys are doing some good work down there. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the Critical Minerals Association that you co-chair.
Yeah, so the Critical Minerals Association is formed of a number of companies with interests in metals production, the circular economy, recycling, typically people with a UK connection. So they might have exploration or production onshore in the UK. They might be based out of here with work overseas. And together we work with the government to make sure that the voice of the domestic metals sector is heard. Industries such as aggregates and quarrying are reasonably well heard in the UK, but the paradox is because we don't yet have a metals industry, it's not heard by government, it's not represented, so we had to step in and do something about that. And we've been pretty effective in that. There is a House of Commons committee that looks at critical minerals. We need more action from this. We would like to see BEIS, that's effectively the Department of Industry, taking more of an interest in the sector. We would like to see a junior minister for mining at some stage, someone who can almost be a one-stop shop and enable things to be more connected. But the Critical Minerals Association, I've been active with them for coming up to 2 years. It's been tremendous what we've achieved so far. And it does really epitomise the fact that you're far stronger together than all trying to do something individually.
Yeah. So maybe someone that is listening, that is in the mining industry, whether they've recently graduated or have some years of experience behind you, maybe if you want to become a member of parliament and I suppose stick up for the cause of mining, then if anyone is listening, then maybe it could be another career path that you could go down, and obviously it could enhance the mining industry if you feel that is the direction that you want to go in.
Absolutely, and I think it has to be said there are some MPs, particularly from Cornwall, who are already heavily backing the development of the sector, but we need more support. We've got to keep working at this, but we'll get there. It's the right time for it.
Yeah, certainly. And as a conclusion, I just wonder if you can give us an outlook for Cornwall Resources over the short and medium term, and also an overview of the Cornwall region and what you're going to see developing across Cornwall over the next, say, 3 to 5 years.
So Cornwall Resources, we are currently focused on the Deep Digital Cornwall project. That's got fieldwork going on through to about January next year. Following that will be processing the data, and that should come up with some really interesting conclusions. Later on, we're aiming at obviously progressing the resource further. That's likely to lead through to a pre-feasibility study. I can't go into timescales on this call, Obviously, we work very closely with our parent company, Strategic Minerals PLC. They are also developing the Lee Creek copper project in South Australia. So they've got a good chain of projects going. In terms of Cornwall more widely, there's a great deal going on. So you've got companies such as Cornish Lithium, British Lithium working in the lithium space. You've got Cornish Metals, the formerly known as Strongbow, with the South Crofty project. There are a number of other companies looking at coming to market as well. And then, of course, just across the border, you've got Tungsten West with the Hemerden deposit. So there's an awful lot going on in quite a small geographic area. We should see some production achieved in the relatively near future. And across the explorers, hopefully some of those exploration projects are going to convert into development projects relatively soon as well. And obviously at Cornwall Resources, we're hopeful that ours will be one of those. The signs are very positive. We've got a very substantial resource. We think that's going to grow significantly. Our resource grade is high. And if you've got grade, that's a good way to getting there.
Yeah, it certainly sounds an interesting and exciting sort of future for the area, which I think is really needed, not just for the area, but also for the UK mining industry, which obviously has sort of died away over the last 3 or 4 decades, obviously since coal was around here. So yeah, appreciate you coming onto the podcast and give us an overview of the area. So if our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, how can they go about doing that? Are you across any sort of social media platforms as well?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn. So if they want to look up my name, Brett Grist, on LinkedIn, they'll find me there. You can take a look at our website, which is cornwallresources.com. And if you wanted to email me, just email info@cornwallresources.com, and we'll be pleased to get back to you.
Yeah, and we can include those in the show notes accompanying this podcast. So really appreciate your time, Brett, telling us your story, telling us the overview of what's happening in Cornwall. Audience, appreciate you listening to this episode, and as always, appreciate your support. Also, please share this episode with friends, family, especially if you're in the Cornwall region or even in the UK. Just so people become more aware of what mining is, and those listening overseas, hope you enjoyed listening to Brett and actually understanding that there is a mining industry here in the UK, although not as big as some other countries, but we are slowly getting there and slowly building up momentum. So appreciate you all for listening. Keep sharing and liking the episodes, whether you're listening to this on the YouTube channel, and I appreciate if you can like and share below. And please keep telling your friends and family about this podcast so it can reach all corners of the world. So really appreciate your time, Brett, again. And until next time, happy mining.